So international break coming up. England have got two pretty big games, Brazil and Belgium. How do you see the squad looking for these games and also going ahead to the Euros? Are we any surprises that you can think of?
Well, maybe not a massive surprise, but I was speaking to someone in the setup last week who seems convinced that Cole Palmer is going to go to the Euros, which I think is I mean, look, on form you'd say yes, obviously he has to, but it does. Southgate's not one for someone coming late into the squad. He tends to have his group. You know, obviously this time he's taking 23 against 26, which obviously narrows it down, but it tightens the group up a little bit more. And so what he's done in the last couple of tournaments in particular is get to kind of the turn of the year into a tournament and had probably 28, 30, 32 at the most in his mind, and then narrowed down from there. But it does feel as though Cole Palmer might be one who breaks in. He only made his debut in November. I think that maybe places some question marks over Jack Grealish, because how many of those wide players can you take?
Is he going to be fit? I mean,
is he going to be fit? Foden obviously is fantastic at City and has therefore moved ahead of him for England on that, and that left side, which ironically used to be a real strength for England, that left hand side. You now kind of look at the front three.
Questions about Rashford as well.
Yeah, it's Kane, Saka, and one other, isn't it? It's Foden. That is not his position. Rashford's not had a great year. Grealish isn't playing. Maddison's played out there. I can't remember which game it was. Didn't look great out there. Again, not his natural position. You wouldn't put Bellingham out there.
Not even talking about Sancho anymore.
No one's even talking about Sancho anymore. No, but you know the composition of the team will centre on whether he picks. I think whether he goes 4-3-3 or 4-2-3-1. And what I was told internally is that they have viewed the Scotland game as the best way to get the best out of Bellingham. So in the Scotland game, he played the Phillips and Rice midfield axis that everybody got really irritated with him when they got to the final of the Euros, and then Bellingham was able to play as a 10. And where they feel that gave them the best balance was that Bellingham had the freedom to go and play, but that inherent Southgate, let's not be unbalanced as a team, was satisfied by having those two sitting deeper. And Bellingham was phenomenal that night. Okay, Scotland not the strongest opposition, but still difficult place to go. Hampden, fantastic atmosphere, and they absolutely ran the show as one of England's best performances. If they go 4-3-3, it then becomes a debate of can you play Rice as a single pivot, and he's absolutely not wanted to do that in the past because he's felt either Rice isn't strong enough or England are too open in that system. So people who want to see Rice, Bellingham, Foden as a 4-3-3 with Saka, Kane and whoever, Grealish, Rashford off the left, I think are going to be disappointed because I think that's too open. And if that will probably become the criticism of him in the next 3 or 4 or 5 months if he doesn't decide to use that at some point in the tournament, because people will say, we've got all these attacking players, Gareth, you're not picking them, what's going on? But Rice has been very, very good for Arsenal as an 8 rather than a 6.
So does Bellingham's ability to play anywhere in midfield, certainly in an advanced role, just end James Maddison's prospects of getting a starting team?
I think so.
Yeah, because Maddison is obviously a classic number 10, but how do you fit all three of those?
Well, England don't play with a 10. Yeah. England, he's wanted to play 4-3-3 for a while. It's why this 4-2-3-1 switch is really interesting. Is Bellingham good enough? The question, I think, for Gareth is Bellingham good enough to, at a tournament level, to reshape your team around?
It probably is.
And you'd say he probably is. But whether Southgate's prepared to actually do that, I think is another matter.
Also relies on Calvin Phillips being the same player he was at the last Euros. And the lad who won the England Player of the Year in 2021, so not that long ago. I'm not sure that he is.
Listen, I just don't think he can take Calvin Phillips and Jordan Henderson. I just think that is classic Southgate caution and conservatism, because it's hard enough to argue the case for one of them, because Henderson's playing in one of the minor leagues in Europe now. It's not one of the big 5 leagues in Europe, the Dutch league, and he's just come out of Saudi Arabia, not done particularly well over there. And you know, Henderson I can see because of his presence around the squad, but that shouldn't just get him in the squad. And Calvin Phillips has had a disastrous 18 months, and he's gone to West Ham, it's been a disaster there as well. So I think what Southgate should do, he was bold with Jude Bellingham at the Euros, pick Kobbie Mainoo. So
I agree with everything you've just said, but I'm going to make what I think would be Southgate's counter-argument to that is, if he doesn't, let's say, I think if he picks one of Phillips and Henderson, and he probably has to drop one of those to get a Mainoo in, Phillips would go, right? Yeah. Because Henderson's part of the leadership group. He's been more consistent player involved with the team. He obviously was in the team in Qatar as well. But can Henderson play as a single pivot in a 4-3-3 at his age?
No.
So his argument would be, if Declan Rice gets injured and I'm playing that system, who is my second choice? Can you really realistically ask Kobbie Mainoo to play that role at 18, 17, 18?
I don't think he's ready to be in the squad at all.
Not ready. So that's where Phillips gets in. Because there's a shortage. The one position, well, I would argue centre-back is another issue for England, but we don't have a kind of ball-playing number 6, can anchor, can run a Rodri-style player who's good enough to anchor that midfield on his own. You could argue Declan Rice can do it, but he's looking at a tournament picture. If Rice gets injured and I haven't picked Phillips, who is going to play in that role? That's why I think he might end up going.
Another name you could pick, he's injured at the moment, but he's had a good season, is Curtis Jones at Liverpool. Again, he was at the Euros last summer, the Euro 21s, and he played a big part of that. Do you think it's too late for Curtis Jones to get in now, considering he's just been injured at the time when he would possibly get a shout for the Brazil or Belgium games?
But where does he play? Who does he get in ahead of?
Well, he's a squad. Obviously, he doesn't start, but he's a squad member to kind of solve that problem with Henderson or Phillips. Rather than take both of those, take Curtis Jones to give you the option of versatility in different positions. It's
like a Mason Mount. You miss the guy you're missing is Mason Mount, the link man. You can't. Like you're talking about having a single pivot, double pivot. You need a guy who can get up and down between Bellingham and Rice. He solves your problem possibly of having to take someone like Calvin Phillips. I think there's a massive issue with Phillips in what he's been through in the last year. You need to get him in the squad for Southgate just to see where his confidence levels are, because looking from the outside looking in and from what you hear before he left City, that his confidence is on the floor. And you can't take a guy like that to a major tournament where you might have to play in a quarter-final or a semi-final and get England over the line in a major tournament. I think it's a massive, massive problem.
Trent Alexander-Arnold, is he a midfielder now or is he a right-back in the England picture?
Well, remember that Southgate was the first one to play him in midfield, and he got pillaged for it. And I remember before the last Euros, he was considering taking Alexander-Arnold as a midfielder, and then decided not to do it. So they've had that in mind for him for a number of years. I think if he's fit, he goes because he can play both positions, and I think they'll look at maybe one or two games at the Euros. Not that they'll ever say that they're overtly winnable, but they will probably look at the group and think there is an opportunity here for Trent potentially to play. We'll have so much of the ball that maybe we could play him, start him as a right back, but basically he plays as a midfielder. I think Southgate's always liked that versatility of being able to play a number of positions. I think if he's fit, he goes, and also because of the other situation with Reece James, who
Shaw's another one. Luke Shaw's another one. Someone who would just be an absolute nailed on certainty to start left back. United aren't expecting him back until the very, very end of the season. That is a very, very tight time frame to prove your fitness before a major tournament. He's nowhere near making the squad for the Belgium and Brazil games. It's a proper race against time, and if he doesn't play, you've got another problem at left back.
Left back's a major problem because Ben Chilwell's injured.
Yeah.
I think Kieran Trippier, all things being equal, Trippier would just play left back, but Trippier's had a nightmare run at Newcastle.
But shouldn't Luke Shaw's priority now? He's been at Man United for 10 years, and it's been a 10-year story of injuries and unavailability. Accept that he's not going to go to the Euros. He can't play the last game of the season for Man United and get into the Euros in the sense that he won't be fit. He won't have had that backup. He needs a clear summer to kind of save his club career, surely.
But with no one else who's biting at his heels to take over at left back for England, you can understand Southgate's preference to give him every chance, because it's we've been sat here talking for 15 minutes, listing all these problems that England have got. He's probably not thinking that left back's one of them. Well, it is now, because if he's not fit, who are you going to play?
Yeah. That's true. And Shaw's one of his trusted lieutenants as well. I mean, Shaw will be one of those that, there'll be some players that maybe would be in his situation who, if they'd only had a couple of weeks to prove their fitness, it probably wouldn't be enough. But I think if Luke Shaw's 70%, he goes because of their relationship and because of everything you just said.
Just in terms of attacking options, we've kind of touched on Rashford. And I think he probably gets in because of what he's done before, because he has that ability to win any game, Marcus Rashford, even though he hasn't done it very often. He's still got that in him. If you're Southgate and you're looking for the striker, is it Ivan Toney, is it Ollie Watkins, is it Dominic Solanke? I mean, you're going to have to take cover for Harry Kane.
It's got to be Watkins, surely.
I think it will be Watkins. He doesn't seem to fancy Toney as much as you would think. I mean, obviously there's the off-field stuff with Toney that Tony's camp and Toney seems to think has been a factor in him not playing as much for England as he feels he could have done. I'm not sure that's true. He just doesn't. I don't know. There are some players he just feels. Madison had to win him over for a long, long time, didn't he? And I feel like Tony's in that situation
Grealish
now.
as well. Grealish for a while.
There are these players who they seem to have to.
Yeah, I mean,
almost a higher bar for them to get in. So I think Watkins, is the front runner to be the deputy. And also, you got to remember that Southgate's used Rashford as the Kane replacement in games. Like in the last Euros, Rashford was the one who was playing the sub through the middle, and Kane, the rare occasions where Kane
even though he doesn't want to.
Even though he doesn't want to, and he's not great there. But that's where he is in the thinking, I think.
See, I was told last season that Man United looked at Ivan Toney and Erik ten Hag decided that he didn't work hard enough pressing the opposition defence to merit a move to United to play in his system. Whether there's an element of that with Southgate, that he needs somebody to be a bit more capable or willing to run across the front three and press. I mean, Harry Kane doesn't do a lot of that, but he does probably more than Toney does.
The only thing I would say about Toney is that I think there's something to be said when you go into a major tournament for players who offer a different option. That if it comes to the last 5 minutes of a game and you're pumping balls in the box, who are you trying to hit? I think there's something to be said. He's taken Calvert-Lewin in the past. Harry Maguire, playing up front. Calvert-Lewin in the last Euros.
So he's the Ricky Lambert figure, is that what
I think there's something to be said for that.
Yeah.
Football isn't that complicated in the last 5 minutes.
Plan B off the bench.
Smash it in the box and hope for the best.
It does make a lot of sense. There's no point necessarily going like for like. We've seen that with the wide players that, Grealish was kind of. Remember the last Euros, Grealish was coming off the bench for 20, 30 minutes in most of the games to try and offer something a little bit different. I mean, Sterling's another one we've not even talked about. Does Raheem Sterling get in the picture?
Well, I was at Chelsea on Monday night and Gareth Southgate was there, and it just felt like a real kind of. I think Sterling's situation is already kind of clear. He's not going to be in the squad, but it really was a kind of a passing of the baton. I thought Cole Palmer was fantastic and he made a big difference. He led Chelsea. And Southgate would have been impressed by that, and Sterling was taken off because he was poor. And I think Raheem Sterling's just nosedived since he left Man City, which I think was always going to be the case because he was playing in such a great team. When he's taken out of that team and put into a team that's not doing well, Raheem Sterling's limitations come to the fore.
I think he's been unfortunate, Sterling, at Chelsea, in that he was sold on the vision of Chelsea by Todd Bowley and Tuchel, and really wanted to join that project, and saw that was an opportunity for him to leave City and join a team who were going to be challenging for trophies, and the whole thing just crumbled around him. I feel a bit sorry for Sterling in that sense.